Good morning. My name is Scott Stanfield. This is episode 75 of the Modern Longevitarian, and I am the Modern Longevitarian. And today's guest is sitting backstage. She'll be on just in a couple seconds. She's the host of the Celebrity Customer Experience live show, also here on LinkedIn. I'm actually going to be on her show in the middle of February. So I'm super excited about having Jill Raff on. We're going to talk about restaurants. Now, here's the thing. There is, and I believe this, and I firmly believe this in my soul, a connection between leadership and longevity. And this connection is because when someone is truly a leader and they've developed a leadership style and they lead people and they lead their business and they lead their family, they've also worked on um, they've also worked on um, I got a message here. Sorry, it just kind of interrupted me that my computer wasn't working. So let's see here. But anyway, I hope this is live. Hope everybody can get this. I got all the check marks across the board, so I'll keep going. But they've also developed their emotional intelligence to a way that has lowered stress in their life. And I just was listening about PQ or positive intelligence. It just came across my radar, and I was listening to a talk at Google by the author of Positive Intelligence. And he said for people who have a higher PQ, a positive quotient, live 10 years longer. And so that's the connection that I see between as I become more of a leader versus being a manager. And so we're going to talk a little about restaurants today, which is something that I spent almost 30 years of my life working in and enjoying and getting to know the people. So before we do that, I just want to say go to my website, strongforlonger.com, and download my book called Outstanding Landing, How to Sleep Your Dreams, because our industry really, really struggles with sleep. There's the cloping where you have to close the bar and then open it the next day. And you have to eat, wind down, do those things that you would normally do, and then wake up early in the morning and you're missing your exercise. You're all these things are going to happen. This cascading effect with hormones that are going to make you hungry during the day. They're not going to suppress your appetite. They're going to crave things like sweet, salty, sugary carbohydrates. And so one of the times I gained 25 pounds in a very short period of time, about 6 to 8 week period of time, is when I had to take over as a director of restaurants in a hotel and work breakfast on top of working in the steakhouse at night. So looks like Jill is here and we're ready to go. So I'm going to go bring her on right now, and let's see here. Let's click on this right button here. Jill Raff of the JillRaff.com group. Welcome to the Modern Longevitarian, where we're going to talk about restaurants today.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed our previous conversations, and I'm looking forward to this. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. And so let's, I know that you grew up in the business. I can see the McDonald's sign behind you. So give us some background about how you became such an expert on restaurants.
Well, I grew up in the industry. As you can see, McDonald's is my background. That sits in my office as really my reminder of my legacy, and all the foundation that I have throughout everything that I've done comes from growing up in the McDonald's franchise. My parents and grandparents opened McDonald's number 150 in March of 1959. And so that was the 4th year of the corporation foundation and founding, I should say. And so I literally grew up in the days where, we'd go to conventions and conferences, and there was Ray Kroc and Fred Turner, and just really, they used to hand make their potatoes, French fries in those days, like throughout everything, and just really working across the board in the industry. And I carried those philosophies that I learned about, customer being first, even though I know today that's up for discussion. The customers today are very different than they were in the 50s and 60s, but certainly that concept and that idea of service, truly serving from heart and putting other people first, and building your business in that way. So that's what I carry forward. I've worked in other industries. I was a fashion designer, a food stylist, a real estate agent in Texas and New York still. But the common thread really has always been about taking care of your client, your customer.
Right. And so I've seen videos where you're talking about, you know, you're riding in the car with your dad, right? And, you know, all of a sudden he sees a line or, you know, or something going, a light bulb out or something like that. And you said he'll be right back. And 20,
Yeah,
30 minutes later, you go in and see he's like, you know, working the line in the McDonald's, always with a smile on his face. I mean, so
yeah.
I mean, talk about that example of having your dad, you know, I mean, you got to think 4 years into McDonald's. I mean, there's movies made about Ray Kroc that are on Netflix now, Founder and things like
Mhm.
this. I mean, it changed. We never talked about this, but I remember in college when I was going to the University of South Carolina, I read a book called The Modernization of Society, or the McDonaldization of Society, right? Talking
Hmm.
about how McDonald's really impacted our society. Like there wouldn't have been a Blockbusters if there hadn't have been a McDonald's, right? You know, those type of things. So, but anyway, back to your dad. Dads are such a powerful thing. I actually did a
Mm.
show on the top 3 lessons I learned from my dad. So, you know, talk about, you know, the experience of learning and seeing your dad in action.
Yeah, I did a show also right around the time of unfortunately, he passed away very
Mm.
early, and 26 and a half years ago. And around the time of his 26th anniversary of his death, I did a whole show dedicated to his wisdom and the things that I learned from him. So, perfect example was whenever, literally, whenever we would go anywhere and pass one of the stores, it was like, "Oh, dad, don't look,"
Right.
because seriously, if there was a light out, we didn't have cell phones in those days either, where you could just pick up the phone and call and say, "There's a light out, get it fixed." He would pull in, but anyway, he had such pride and ownership, both emotionally, not just tangibly and technically, that he would pull in because he had to go in and help out, and so it was always, "Oh, I'll be right back." But, he would get caught up. We'd go in and I'd see him, his sleeves were pushed up. And my mom tells a story how she would always, after they had been in the business for a while and started to see some success, because they started with nothing, they had to borrow money from the bank. And uh, they had traveled to Italy, and he had bought these nice leather shoes in Italy. And so she said she was like, "Oh my gosh," because every time she'd see him at the fry station, he loved working the fry station. People who work for him, I've been interviewing people, and they all talk about the fact that your dad loved to work on the fry station. And my
Mhm.
mom's like, "Oh God, there he is shaking the basket and the grease falling on those beautiful new Italian leather shoes." But
Yeah.
he would just jump right in with them. And so I really saw leadership at a point where he didn't hold himself above everyone else. Everyone really saw him as a part of them, that he stepped in and he worked with them side by side. He would greet them by name. He knew about their kids and their family by name, literally, and would always ask about how they are and how their family members are, asking them by name. And
Mhm.
he would look you in the eye. He was famous for knowing that he would look you in the eye and you literally felt you're the only person in the room. He had
Mhm.
that magic about him. But he also talked about how he didn't know it all, and that it's okay to make a mistake. He would tell his managers, "Try this. If it doesn't work, it's okay. We'll do something different next time." So there was all these things where he gave his people, he built trust, right? The trust was earned, but he taught them, he engaged with them, and
Mhm.
then he trusted them to do their job. And that really went very, very far.
Right. Well, that's amazing, you know, and I think that it takes sometimes, you know, a little bit longer to learn these lessons that we learn from from our parents. You know, the reason that I have this modern longevitarian show, is, you know, in a way, you know, inspired by what is directly inspired by both of my parents getting cancer, and they survived,
Mm,
but they were in their 50s, right? They both were
Wow.
55, and it was a couple years apart because dad's a couple years older than mom, and dad's 72 now, and mom turns
Mm,
70 in a couple months, and I'm
great.
blessed to have them around and be able to call them on the phone and talk to them if I can get them on the phone, right? Not every time I can't always get them on the phone, but and my dad's, has watched the show that I did. I didn't tell him about it in advance when I was doing it live, but the one
Wow.
where the life lessons, and we raced go-karts when I was really young, and young up until I was in my 20s. And so a lot of those life lessons I learned, at the racetrack with him,
Mm,
and watching him the same way you watched your dad. And so that's super, super cool. One more question I have about your background, and then we'll get
mhm,
into some of the things you work on today, like maybe the three E's, and talk about that.
mhm.
But is you went to Cordon Bleu Paris,
I
right?
did.
Yeah, and
Yes.
that's where Julia Child went. And so I just, I know that. So what was it like being in Paris, going to Cordon Bleu? I mean, and what was that experience like?
Mm, it was a dream come true.
Mm.
It really was. So I had studied French years before, but I hadn't really used it in a while. And the first course, the course was done to get the diploma. They call it the Grand Diplôme.
Mhm,
It's 3 levels, and so the first level is taught in French, and I love that. And then I thought about, should I go to the CIA? And then I thought, well, if I have an opportunity to go to France and learn directly from the French about French cuisine, then, I'd rather do that than learn from someone who learned from the French. And I got
mhm,
to use my French, which was amazing. But to be immersed in that food service culture and to learn directly was so incredible. And I actually, because I wanted to do it quickly so I could get back to work, I took both the cuisine part and the pastry part together simultaneously. So it was a lot of work, but it was so exciting. Like, I always thought I would do it many years later, and just for my own pleasure. And in this case, I was kind of doing it in preparation and to support my food styling. And
mhm,
it was just the most phenomenal experience. And I was in Paris, and then I did my middle terms in London.
mhm.
They had a Le Cordon Bleu franchise there. It was terrible. That's why there's no more franchise in London. And I recognize that, but I did it because it was a more intense, condensed course. So I thought I could finish earlier. But the benefit, there's always an upside, is that I finished my courses earlier, and I waited for the schedule to get back on track to go back to Paris to finish. And in the meantime, I got to do a stage and work in Harrods of London, to work in Harrods pastry kitchen.
Mhm.
And that was something where I saw those food halls. Unfortunately, they're not quite the same now, but in those days, famous, and just went on and on, the most spectacular food you'd ever see, and every kind of food from all over the world. So to now, years later, to go back and be able to work in, see how it is to cook and to bake. I mean, I cooked a little bit. I mostly did pastry,
Mhm.
but to go station to station. And in fact, Scott, it was really cool because in the viennoiserie section, where we would make the Danish, the croissant, the brioche, we every morning we made the viennoiserie, and it was delivered to the palace, to the queen. So it's
Mm.
kind of cool to think that I was baking for the queen.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was an amazing experience all in all, and just I feel really lucky to have had that opportunity.
Yeah, that is super cool. Um, I've cooked for some, well, not cooked for, but served, as a director of food and beverage at a hospital for some state
Mm.
senators and stuff like that. But I've interviewed, actually I worked with a chef, Rich Beechner, that actually served President Bush, the
Hmm.
number two, right? When he
Uh-huh.
was working at a place in Pennsylvania. But yeah, that's super cool that you've been able to do that. That's amazing.
It's cool.
So let's get into the three E's, right? Your three E's is what you really, the foundation of what you teach, people like me, people who are restaurant GMs or managers, owners, things like that. So what's give us a breakdown of what the E's are, and then we'll kind of go into them and go from there.
Yeah, sure. So my 3E formula, or E3 formula, I should say, it's like E cubed, right? So it's
Right.
educate
Hmm.
times engage times entrust equals happy, loyal employees. And happy, loyal employees, of course, equals happy, loyal customers. And that's the idea behind it.
Right. Well, that's where you said there's a little, I guess there's going to be a little conflict as we move forward into the new world, because used to be customers were first, and now some people are saying that the employees come first, right? And I believe that. I believe that employees come first, because if you really, get the employees where you need them to be, and they're super happy and engaged, and you can trust them, they're gonna that's gonna trickle into the actual guest experience, right? Is what I really look at. And so, which goes into the name of your show, right? Celebrity guest experience, right? So, those things. But so
Yeah.
the first one is educate, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
educate. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what you say is 100% true. And everyone is always saying, focus on the customer first. But say and feel very strongly that we need to first focus on the employee experience, because the great employee experience will naturally lead to a great customer experience. So you've got to start from the inside, which is why my process is called the Inside Out Framework, EX to CX. And the 3 E's is the foundation of that process. So educate. Why educate?
Hmm.
Because there's a difference between educate and train. They're not synonymous.
Right.
And we have to first educate our people. And that means from the very beginning, when you're putting word out to recruit people, when you're training, when you're hiring, I'm sorry, when you're bringing people on board, you need to educate them about your core values, what you stand for, what your expectations are for their behaviors as a part of your team. If they're going to be a part of your team, what does that mean? What does that look like? What are the mutual understandings? Because you can train for skill, and it depends upon the job. Obviously, if you're a doctor, then that doesn't apply, right?
Right.
But in the restaurant world, you can, and a certain level of a chef, of course, you want that. But nevertheless, the way I look at it is there's two parts, and in bringing people on, and when you start to do the onboarding, I believe that you should have two-part manual. Most people have their operations manual, their training manual.
Hmm.
I believe you need to have an educational manual and a training manual. And the difference is, a training manual is your how-to information that even someone with a bad attitude can follow, where an educational manual really gives them the guidance on who you are, what you stand for, and how they fit into that bigger picture. And really important, that educate piece is crucial before anything else is laid upon that.
Right. Well, we can get into talk about, having people on your team that have a bad attitude, or develop a bad attitude over time. I've seen people's attitude
Mhm.
change because stuff just turns sideways in their life, and then they can't distress. They have no tolerance to absorb stress anymore. And I've seen that
Mm.
impact people in a negative way. And actually, to have a model employee that had to be termed because
Mm.
they just were in a super bad spot, but then come back,
Mm.
right? And pick it back up when their life is in order again, and do
Yeah.
that. So life's fragile, right? It's not like an employee's not always through the whole life of it is not the same every time.
And it's a
But
stressful business, let's face it. Even in normal time, normal.
right.
There's no such thing as real normal, right? But even in non-pandemic times, it's a stressful business.
Well, it is, especially if you're in a restaurant, that is built to scale, right? To be built to do high volume and to execute on that level.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, that McDonald's used to actually make their own fries at each store, right? They don't now, right? They come in from frozen bags, right? And those type of things. And
Yeah.
so if you're running a restaurant, like I managed a restaurant that during the summer before COVID, did 900, 600 to 900 covers a day, every day during the summer. Fourth of
Mm.
July was 1,100 covers, right?
Mm.
And if you're making mashed potatoes from scratch, right, and cutting your own steaks, right,
Yeah.
there's a chance you may have a run on burgers, right? And you gotta figure that out, how you gonna, manage that. And if you if you didn't plan right in the beginning and stuff like that. Luckily for me, the team around me had been through this a lot and they really knew what they're doing. And so there's amazing, process for that. So it is super stressful
Mhm.
industry. And I think people who don't have never worked in it don't get it. They really just don't
Yeah.
understand how stressful the restaurant world is. And I think the rest of the world could really learn from the leadership of great restaurant managers and leaders and how to operate under stress, right?
Mm,
Really good.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So there's a difference between training and education, and I absolutely love that. I agree with it wholeheartedly, and I never heard it explained that way. You and I talked about the quote from that Greek poet and soldier from 600 BC. That's we do not rise to our expectations; we fall to the level of our training. And for those who watch the show who have worked for me before, have heard me say that over the last 4 or 5 years, and I agree with that because the
Mm,
expectation of our customers or our guests are high. The expectation of our ownership or the managers are high.
yep.
The expectations for your own paycheck are high. So when the shift hits the fan, right? Right. When the shift hits,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We do not rise to our expectations. We fall to the level of our training and, as you put it, your education, right? So I'll let you expand on that a little bit, and then we can go from there. Right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's so true because in anything, but especially I think in the restaurant industry where the pace is just so fast and the expectation changes based on every single customer. So in some ways, it's pretty unique. Each situation is unique. On the other hand, after a while, you start to understand that there will be a set of certain things based on the way you set up your delivery, the way your environment is, the way your service is, all of those things. But I think if you educate your people from the beginning and train them so that they are right, rising to that level of skill and preparedness. To me, it's about the preparedness. I think I love that quote, and to me, that's all about your preparedness. And as a real estate agent, one of the things and I feel a lot of these principles and basic foundations are things that I learned and that I've applied across all these different industries. And so now when I'm working with someone, I'm able to kind of pull and cross pollinate these different ideas and things that I learned in different industries. And that quote actually was something that was used and I learned in my real estate world too, because it's about being prepared for objections and what's happening and how do we make sure that our customers are happy. And so if you're prepared and you know the company's position, you know their value, you know the language they speak, the what they want for you to represent them, then and they've gone through the steps that I teach and they have engaged with you and then entrusted you, then you're empowered. You're empowered to take independent action and you're empowered as an employee to make decisions and know how to quell that fire, right? How to quench that fire of whatever problem it is that's going on. And therefore, by that education piece, you are able to deal with every situation that comes up in alignment with the brand culture.
Right. Basically, you're giving them a framework on people who work here think this way and we make decisions this way and this is how we do it. Where a training profile may be, this is our steak, or this is how we make our burger, or this is our process on these are the salad dressings we have, and this is what's gluten free and not gluten free. But then you have this education aspect, which is basically giving them a framework to work in. That way, when you as you put it in your step three, you're in trust. When you, as I say, release them back into the wild, they actually have a framework on thinking that way. And so I've done that over the years where I was like, no, this is how we do this here, and done that, but we had no specific manual for that. So I know you have your show, so we have to move a little quicker, right? So let's move to the second E here, and then and we'll go from there, right?
Sure. So the second E is engage. So once you've laid the foundation and you've educated them on what your expectations are and how they should represent you, then next is engage. You're only going to be as strong and as solid as you are as a team through engagement, engaging with your people. So as leaders, as management, you need to get in there and really work by them side by side. Let them know that you believe in them and that you're there to work with them, that you really are a part of the team. And engagement makes all of the difference. That, when you're not engaged, when your employees are not engaged, that's when you have a high churn rate. And if you're churning all the time, I just have to ask, are you making butter or are you making a business, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're constantly have turnover because you haven't engaged your people, they don't feel like they're a part of something bigger. They don't feel responsible for the success of what's going on. Then why are they there? They can just get a paycheck anywhere. Everyone has a choice of where to work. And so I believe that it's important for every company to create a culture within their company that really appreciates and shows the value of both their employees and their customers. So that engagement is really crucial. The cost to a restaurant for the turnover is tremendous, and it's going to outweigh any other cost that you would have by investing in your people instead, showing your people that you care because you're supplying them the knowledge and the tools by which to be successful for you.
Right. The actual cost of turnover is something that most people don't even realize, the actual number that's been put on that. And I interviewed not doctor, but Professor Bruce Tracy from Cornell University. He co-authored a study back in 2005, 2006 on the cost of turnover in the hotel world, hospitality world, and it translates over. And I actually, before I interviewed him, I plugged that number into an inflation calculator to take us to 2019, and the
Mm,
average cost of turnover per employee is about $7,400. 52% of that um, is in lost productivity. You think when
mm,
somebody has short timers disease and what they're doing, mistakes they're having, and then when you're bringing a new employee online, and you're training them, they're in the training process, the mistakes they make, and all those different types of things, right? You like, oh, a cook could, overcook some, a side dish, and you have to, and he batched out all the broccoli, and it's all overcooked, and it's this wrong color of green,
yeah.
right? And you have to throw that out and cook more. There's two things that have happened there: A, the product loss, but then B, now the tables that had broccoli on their order, that partial food is in the window, is now waiting, right? And now your ticket times are dragging now because your ticket times are dragging. They're not getting their entrees. Then what's happening is there's backup at the front door, so you're not moving at the speed that you need to be doing because of that one employee made a mistake on cooking broccoli. You are actually now slowing everything down and losing money in a way. And so 52, just if you just look at lost productivity, if you're got in fast food, it's over 100% turnover rate. But if you have 50 employees and you got a 75% employee turnover rate, and it costs you $3,600 for every person you turn over,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's like that's a lot. That's a lot of dough, right? That's a lot of, no pun intended, right?
Yeah, exactly. And because most people, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, most people don't know what that's actually costing them. I have created an employee cost turnover calculator on my website.
Wow.
So anyone who's watching who really wants to get an idea of truly what that dollar figure is that's costing them, go to jillraff.com. My name, Jill, Raff, like French fry.com. And under services, if you hover over that, it'll come up as an employee churn cost calculator. And you can just plug in your own numbers because it's unique to each person. And I think you will be very surprised at what
Mm.
the turnover is costing you. Just incorporating all those different turns. And then one of the things, that you mentioned, that's all the internal stuff. But what about the impact on your customer, right? Their experience. Either you're just going to go ahead and serve it because you're worried about timing and that it's timed with all the other plates that are going out, right? So everyone's eating together. And then it's bad. So they're going to complain, or they won't complain and they just won't come back. They'll complain on social media instead.
Mhm.
Or you have to wait and redo it, which means then, and I've had this happen so often, and it's incredibly frustrating that they'll mess up on things. And there's like 4 or 5 of us at a table, and everyone's eating at different times. And then half people were ready to leave, and someone's just starting to eat. It's really bad. And so that customer, the way it affects the customer experience, and this is where and why I feel so strongly that employee experience definitely affects your customer experience. And then, ultimately your customer is not going to return. They're going to trash you, or, they're certainly not going to refer to you. So there's a lot of missed opportunities that happen. And as a result of that, in addition to the financial hit.
Right. I remember it was probably about 15 or let's just say 15, right, years ago. I heard the first time I ever heard this was like there were internal guests and then external guests,
That's what
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
call it
so the
internal and
internal,
external
right.
customers.
So what I used to see myself as when I was a general manager of a restaurant is that I was the consummate host. I was hosting everybody, right? I spent more time there than anybody else did for the most part. So even when the owner came in, it was in my dining room. I was hosting them. I was hosting the employees. I was doing my best I could to serve them. It took me, I had to really develop an emotional intelligence level that was so much higher than what it was in the very beginning of my career. Like for instance, Timothy's watching the show here, Tyler Lamont. Um,
Awesome.
he actually, we worked together very early in my career. He actually saw me throw a plate of fried oysters across the kitchen, right? Back in the day when I had a very bad temper. And so he's probably listening to this show, first show I know that he's ever listened to, and saying that this is not the Scott Stanfield I worked for, even though I know it's the right Scott Stanfield because but I had not found emotional intelligence. I didn't know any of these things then, right?
Yes, I
And so
love
it
that.
was not about, for me, it was not about the employee experience at all. It was just like, I'm the boss. You listen to me. This is the way we're going to do it. I'm going to break you down, and then I don't care if I even build you back up the right way. We're just here to do on a mission, and this is the mission, and I'm the manager, and this is it, right?
Ego. Yeah,
Yeah,
ego was
very, very
involved.
bad, right? And yeah, yeah, so you don't have to point it out, right? But just,
Sorry, but not for you, but it happens all the time, right?
it
Like
does, right? Yeah.
it's coming from that place of ego.
Right, well, it also comes from a place from fear, right? Where
Yes,
it's like,
they're closely
like
connected. Yeah.
yeah, it is, right? Because you're like, "Oh my gosh, if this goes wrong, you start going down this trail, this lizard brain, fight or flight thing is like, next thing you know, it's like, okay, this plate of oysters is wrong. The guest is going to complain. I'm going to have to comp it. My comps are going to be too high. It's going to continue doing this. If I don't fix it, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to be homeless, and then I'm going to die, right?
It's a
You, you know,
snowball. Yeah.
and it took me like 2.2 seconds to go, I'm gonna die, right? It's like,
Yeah.
so I've said multiple times is that, especially when done these shows about restaurants, is that people hear me talk about this now, and people who, and I even told employees, that, it's like, you're the luckiest team to ever work for me. And they're like, why? I said, because I'm more evolved as a leader now than I ever have been. And I started at such a deficit to be able to get to the point to where I was at the end of my career, that I wish I could go back in time and fix all those things. So, Timothy, I'm sorry
I
for throwing that plate of oysters across the kitchen at the Carolina Crab House back 25 years ago. But,
Well, the good news is, look, we all have a past, and hopefully we're all evolving and developing. And I'm
right.
glad that you mentioned the emotional intelligence, because my E3 formula actually is founded on the concept of Daniel Goleman's
Mm,
emotional intelligence, and the idea of really applying that, the human side of the business first. And that's why it's my foundational part of my training, because it really is the human piece in the whole equation.
yeah, I love Daniel Goleman. He actually is one of the I've seen his books and the talks, and it was just actually I didn't listen to the whole thing yet, but it was just on Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu, I think
Mm,
last week or the week before that. And part of me listening to his stuff, he actually talks about transcendental meditation, and I'm on record that I actually took transcendental meditation when I was in Santa Monica, and that's the type of meditation that I do. And the show today is an hour earlier, so I didn't do it this morning, so I'm gonna do it like immediately following the show. I'll just get into my morning routine and do that. And that's a big part of, and it really helped with my emotional intelligence and
mm.
allowed me to have more space between that type of reaction where throwing something across the room, across the kitchen, to responding with reason and logic and those things. So it's, yes, I love him. And the first time I heard the term emotional intelligence and EQ was from Dr. Travis Bradberry, who wrote the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0, co-authored that. at a leadership summit that I was attending at my church here in Park City, Utah. And so, yeah, that's amazing to hear, because emotional intelligence is actually the thing that
Mhm,
is becoming more mainstream now, but
mhm,
it's really not there. But then you also look at what Danny Meyer talks about with hiring for hospitality factors. So this
mhm.
HQ, and so now there's IQ, EQ, HQ, and then I just stumbled on PQ, which is positive quotient, right? So there's,
Yeah,
we're getting
everyone's
multiple
playing
things.
off of the
Yeah,
yeah.
the EQ thing, yeah, and
Mhm.
so, but emotional intelligence by far, can help you, outperform anybody with a higher IQ. So I encourage you, if you've never heard of it or want to dig deep, go do that. And if you're working in a restaurant world, dig into what Jill teaches. It's so amazing so far. So
Thank you.
you're
Well,
welcome.
and just what you're saying, I just want to mention that, everything that I read and everything that I hear is talking about in the world that we have going forward, where AI, throw in some more acronyms, right? Where artificial intelligence and technology is becoming so prominent in every business, you can't avoid it. People are feeling like, well, I'm being replaced. But the thing that I love is nothing, at least not now, and I don't see it any time in our lifetime, that they can't replace our emotional uh the way we think and the way we respond and the decisions that we make in the moment based on what's going on. They can't replace the human element. And they're actually saying that while before people are like, great, anyone with an IQ is going to do better in life, they're going to get the better jobs and do all that. Actually, it's the opposite. They're saying now in this next generation and going forward that actually it's those people who have a higher EQ, a higher emotional quotient, and an emotional intelligence will supersede those with the higher IQ, because the IQ can be done. It's kind of like what we talked about before. Anyone, can be trained to do those things that ordinarily would be great for someone who has a high IQ. But it's very difficult to train emotional intelligence, and you can guide them along the way, but it's those people who really know how to work with other people well and lead, be a good team leader from an emotional place, a connection to human connection, that is going to outweigh the IQ and the
It is.
AI.
Yeah, yeah, it is, right? And so the first thing is this, is understand in John C. Maxwell's book, the 25 irrefutable laws of leadership.
Mhm.
One of them is the law of the lid. An organization will never outgrow the level of the leadership. Like your dad had amazing leadership, smile, sleeves rolled up, in his Italian shoes, running the fry station, helping people out, right? And so what happens is that people you talk to today is to respect that level of emotional intelligence your dad had. We didn't use the term then, but
Yeah,
that's really what I see is in that story, right? So what happens is that is if you have a high emotional intelligence, you will then raise the collective emotional intelligence of your organization, right? When I took a job at the Stanley Hotel, I noticed there was a gap between my emotional intelligence and the emotional intelligence of the team. And that's where I came up with the term collective. There was a collective emotional intelligence of the team that was not as high as the team that I had left and cultivated at, Hotel Park City and the Roost Chris Steakhouse. And so then I really got to see it, because there was a difference between that. And so I knew what was happening. And so what happens is, you then, if somebody becomes emotionally hijacked, you can bring them in the office and you can explain to them calmly what happened to them. There's this flinch response. You responded to this emotionally, you got hijacked, and you can train them only because you remained emotionally calm in the moment. And then you can teach them these tactics. And if they don't get it, and you want a team that has a high emotional intelligence, you may actually have to let that person go to raise the collective, right?
right.
And when I was there was one time that we had a hostess that had a very low emotional intelligence. She had to be, relieved from duty from her position, and the next week our sales went up 5%, right?
Wow.
Right. And
Wow.
so it
That is a perfect example,
exactly,
right?
and so
The
great
energy
person,
is,
right?
yeah, affects
Yeah.
others.
Yep, it impacted others to the point that where the rest of the host team couldn't perform on the level of their capacity. It changed the entire environment, right?
Amazing. And
So
obviously your customers felt it too, right?
right.
Yeah.
Well, exactly, right? Because things just changed, right? And then when that changed, everybody could take a deep breath. Everybody, those things happen. And so it's the first time I'd ever seen
Mm,
one person make that big of a difference on the top line sales of a restaurant. You think that it like, well, okay, we get caught up in like we're short staffed or this, we need the person or I like her or whatever. But
mhm.
you look at them from an emotional standpoint, emotional intelligence standpoint, and knowing that you have a strong emotionally intelligent team, right? And then you make that tough decision with the help of the human resources department. When you work for a large corporation, it's not the GM that makes the decision. I got blamed for it, and I take the brunt as being the general manager, but really HR makes the final decision on those things,
Mm,
right? But it moved the needle 5%. I mean, you
yeah.
can't, numbers don't lie, right? So,
That's really amazing, amazing. And yeah, and what you said goes back to the hiring process that it's so easy to think, oh, I really connected with that person. They're so interesting. I really felt good about them. But you're not hiring, you're not they might be a great person to go have dinner with and learn more about their experiences, but it doesn't mean that they're right for that position. And to that end, actually, I want to share with you something that I'm doing right now. I'm getting certified this next month in an assessment tool, communications tool called the Type Coach.
mm,
And it actually takes this step that we're talking about with EI a bit further, because we may just assume that this person's not behaving a certain way based on the way we are and the personality type that we are, how we are intuitively and innately by nature. And then you throw in, of course, everyone's experiences on top of that. We all are very different when we walk in those doors. And so this becomes almost like a something that level sets the employees and the staff, and including the management, everyone that's there working together. Because when you have this knowledge of how each person is different and how each person's unique, no one's better than the other. It's that we're all just different. But then when you know that about someone, you're like, oh, so I'm an extrovert, but they're an introvert. So I'm just like out there and I'm ready to face what it is. Let's talk about it. And they're like, no, wait a minute. I need some time to really process this, and then I'll be able to talk about it.
mhm,
There's all these different types, and so I'm really excited about being able to offer that to clients, because when you have the knowledge of why there's conflict, it might be not necessarily about what you think it is, but it might just be a matter of that we just are different people and we communicate in different ways.
mhm.
And it teaches us
Absolutely.
how to communicate with them so that they will successfully hear what we're saying.
That's amazing. And communication is so, so important, right? Once I became a better leader, I had to become a better communicator
Mhm.
because you can't, screaming and yelling doesn't is not a form of communication that works. This is not, Marines, Paris Island, drill sergeant level stuff, right? You have to become a better communicator, and with that. So I know we're getting close on time. I want to hit the third E, and then we can talk about your live show, and then you can go do your live show and people can get a double dose of Jill today, right? So
Um, yeah, so the third E is in trust. So at this point, you've educated your people on who you are. They know their expectation. They know where they are as a part of this, and you're aligning your brand culture expectations. You've now engaged with them. You've shown them side by side what it means. You've engaged them by showing them that they're an important part, that they are actually responsible for the success of your restaurant, not just that you want them to be involved because you're giving them a paycheck. You've proven yourself from that side. Now it's time to flip it a little bit and say, now we can trust you. Now we put our trust in you and the work that you're doing for us, and you provide opportunities to actually catch them doing something right, and support them for that and reward them for that and make them feel proud. And because when you empower them, but when you are entrusting them, you're creating that empowerment, and when they're empowered, they're going to be able to perform their best work. Forbes has a study that says that when an employee feels that their ideas are heard, they're 4.6 times more likely to perform their best work. And that's what you want, people to feel acknowledged, heard, appreciated, respected, and a part of it. And you can entrust them to do these things and find that they will have opportunities for independent decision-making skills, which is going to build their confidence, which is going to make them a leader, because I believe we need to create leaders throughout our business, throughout every level, leaders at every level. And yes, while there's still that respect, as you mentioned before, right? You know who's in the management, but they're just as an important part of it. Without them, there would be no business. So by now trusting your people, really, let's face it, trust is the foundation of every healthy, strong relationship. And so when you build on that trust, and all the other pieces are solid, there's no way your business is not going to succeed. There's no way that your customers won't feel the cohesiveness, the collaboration, the true work family that you've created to give the best service to them.
Mm. That's amazing, right? I used to say this is that once we've done all this work to select people with the best character or vet out people who don't have emotional intelligence or, good character and maybe stealing from the company or impacting the guest experience through getting emotionally hijacked and, those type of things and then train them. And then you put, as you educate them, is that we release them back into the wild, right? We've selected this people, we've put them through the process, and now you're back into the wild, and now we just get to pull the strings on cultivating this ecosystem that everybody feels warm and fuzzy and safe, and we give these great dining experiences, the best dining experience ever, right, is really what our focus was. And so I absolutely love that. That's amazing. And I also love that leaders on every level, right? Because you may have a dish machine operator that is leading other newbies or people who
Mm.
have never, been in the business or new hires and really kind of leading them that way. And that's where the education process even goes even deeper, right? Because, someone as a GM or a manager, an executive chef, supervisor may have invested into that DMO,
Mm.
right? And then now they're able to invest in the next one and continues to grow and exponentially do that. So over time, your job actually gets easier because you actually have duplicated yourself into these other leaders on every level,
Yes,
right?
and you're creating this wonderful feeling of, well, it's twofold. Wonderful feeling of now they have the opportunity to be a leader and someone to guide others. So that's going to build their confidence. It's going to make them feel better about themselves, higher, better self-esteem, as well as confidence in the job that they're doing. But it's also creating empathy because
Mm,
now they know what it feels like on the other side. And the other thing that I teach when I work with companies is to actually give opportunities, and this is part of the engage, is to allow everybody to experience the other tasks that they are. The purpose is still the same, right? So everything is purpose driven for the objective of the brand, of the company, of the restaurant. But at the end of the day, we all have our different tasks as a piece of that to make this wheel work smoothly.
mm,
But at the if you allow each person to experience what the other is doing, still master the area that they're responsible for, but experience what others are doing in their tasks, you're going to create an empathy for each other that you'll understand. You don't look down necessarily on someone who's a dishwasher or someone who's cleaning how, maybe even someone thinks, oh, the host, what's the big deal, it's such a cushy job, but there's a lot of things to juggle, right? So if you give everyone a chance to experience what the other one's doing, you're creating empathy, which will then also unite your team as a true collaborative and cohesive team when they're actually working together.
mm. That's amazing. So amazing, right? Because empathy is the common thread that bridges through everything that I've ever studied: leadership,
Mm,
relationships, fatherhood, parenting, marriage, all of those things. Empathy is a common thread. And you start pulling that thread, right? It's just,
yes.
thing. Even, FBI hostage negotiation has a tactical empathy step, with Chris Voss and Never Split the Difference, which
Love
is,
that book.
yeah, which is one of
Absolutely.
my favorites right there. It's,
Yeah, I've got the
yeah,
book and I listened to the audio.
yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, yes, it is fantastic. Game changer for me, absolute game changer, which helped me become a better leader, right? Because I knew that I had a sequencing that would allow me and tools that I could pull out that I needed to get more information from people and then help them understand what we really needed them to do versus me trying to bulldoze over them like a rhino, would be perceived to.
Mm.
We just a couple minutes, so give us an elevator pitch on your show, Celebrity Customer Experience.
Sure. So it's called Celebrity Customer Experience, Riffs with Jill Raff, and where we riff on literally anything from employee to customer experience. And why celebrity customer experience? Because we all know how celebrities are treated. We all know the pampering, the attention that they get. And I believe that every customer should feel like a celebrity. They should get the same treatment, the same pampering, because at the end of the day, when they go to pay their check and you're depositing it in the bank, every dollar is worth the same. Their dollar's not any more valuable than yours is. So I think that to maintain great repeat customers, to build on referrals and repeat business, then you need to make sure that everybody feels like they're getting celebrity customer experience.
Yeah, it's I've had the pleasure, being in Park City, Utah, running a steakhouse. Sundance, comes every year. So there's been plenty of,
Mm,
the celebrities that I've, had the privilege to see come in our restaurants. Sam Elliott, Brad Pitt,
cool.
right? James Franco, Jimmy Fallon, yeah, James Belushi,
Mm,
or Jim Belushi, excuse me. And then when I was in Santa Monica, we had Wayne Brady that came in all the time,
mm,
and so I definitely see how people amp up their game when you
right.
have those type of people in their section or in the restaurant, those type of stuff. And so I love your concept of, if we did that, if the restaurant industry did that, treated every single person, it would be it would be absolutely an amazing experience for everybody. But we don't do that, right? Kind of let our guard down and do those different things.
And why not? Right? Like
How
they
could
know what to do. Why
Yeah,
not? It doesn't cost any more.
right.
It's just that goes back to the education, right? Have they been educated
Yeah,
that this is the way they serve each and every person, each and every time? It's that consistency that
right,
I learned in McDonald's, right? It's
right,
every time it's the same.
right. There was one time, and I'll make this really quick, is that, one of the restaurants, our score on Open Table was really low, and every server got the chit from Open Table, and it told them if there was a web reservation. If there's a web reservation, we knew they were going to get an email asking them to review the restaurant. So what I
Mm,
did is that I said, every table you get, says web reservation on it. I want you to give them the best service you've ever given anybody.
mm,
And what happened was, the halo effect is the service went up on everybody, right? And we ended up being number one on TripAdvisor, and number one from not even in the top 10 to 6 weeks later, number one on Open Table. So all those things happened, but it was just a focus on 50% of our reservations that were just on the Open Table web reservations. It raised the game everywhere. And giving that feedback to the team, where we were moving up the rankings in the best of on Open Table in Park City, Utah, really helped with that. And so there could be things like that that restaurant managers could do to help, might move the needle on all of that stuff. So
and but just because someone didn't book online, they might not get prompted to give a review online. Doesn't mean they're not going to go out and give a review anyway. So have that same attitude. It comes again back down to attitude. Have the same attitude about every customer that comes on, and just assume they're going to go out and give you a review.
right, right. And I get it. I totally understand that. But sometimes you could just focus on one area, but then it could raise the whole
Hmm.
thing, right? But if we did, right, if we treated everybody the way that Wayne Brady was treated, or what we did around Brad Pitt when he came in, or those type of people, right? Um, it, it would totally change the outlook of your restaurant. I mean, literally, would create, no pun intended, but these raving fans that were really like foaming at the mouth, and really talk about how great you were and how great the service was. But
That's the
people
goal.
just, they add this level of importance to somebody who's famous or celebrity than they don't do, to a normal person, right? It's
And
just
we're all
really,
people. Like
yeah,
we all do think the same things, just that's kind of crazy, but that's
yeah,
our society. So that's why I stress the celebrity customer experience, because truly, if you think about it, everybody deserves that. And it's going to help
right,
you. It's not the customer side, but it's also going to help you as a business be more successful.
absolutely. So while I'm gonna I want to say two things. John, thanks for watching the show. Here's his comment: I had a manager tell me once, under promise and over deliver.
Absolutely.
Um, Yeah, I definitely believe in the over delivering part. I don't know about under promising, right?
Yeah,
With
I
that.
agree with you.
Um, and then Sharon said she loved the oyster plate story. She remembers throwing markers when she was an editor at a high school newspaper. And then another one from Sharon. This has been one of my personal beliefs for ages. Amazing what a difference it makes in every one area of your life. So thanks, Sharon and John and Timothy and Bernard for commenting on the show earlier today. You've got to run. People can find you at jillraff.com. If you're a restaurant looking for consulting, call Jill, and she can definitely help you out.
It'd be
Jill,
my
thanks for coming on the
pleasure.
show.
Thank you so much. It was really great. And yeah, and I look forward to hearing from anyone. If they have any questions, just want to talk, please reach out. Jill@jillraff.com is my email address, or check out my website, which is being updated, by the way, but it's still good, and you can reach me there. And then go check out the employee churn calculator. You'll find that under services. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on the results of that.
Yep, I
Thank you,
would
Scott.
definitely.
This was really awesome.
You're welcome, right? And I definitely would go plug in some numbers from the last place I worked and see what if I can remember all the, input things and see what that comes out. And we can talk about that when I come on your show,
Yeah,
February 11th, right? We can talk about that.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd love
Yep.
it.
So thanks again. You,
Cool.
I know you got to run, so we're just going to wrap it up right here. Jill Raff, JillRaff.com. Her show is a celebrity customer experience, and check out her E3. We just go back and watch the show if you just joined late about all of these things we talked about, how to be an amazing restaurant operator. Jill, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I just want to mention my show is on Thursdays, 12 p.m. Central Time. Every Thursday, 12 p.m. Central is with a guest. And because of you, Scott, I now also do a quick, up to 10-minute, just quick experience wins, quick stories on Tuesdays at 10 o'clock. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, the solo episode is definitely something I love. I do, on average, 2 a week, 1 to 2 a week. And some people tell me there's some of the favorite shows that I even do. Nothing, no, nothing against any of the guests that have been on the shows, but it gets to, instead of it being, it just changes the focus of it. And so I'm glad you're doing it. I can't wait to see them.
Thanks so much.
All right. You take care. We're
You
going to
too.
roll credits. Thanks for watching.
Cheers.
My
Thank
name is
you.
Scott Stanfield, the modern longevitarian. Cheers.